Hello and welcome back to another week of Open Mic Night. Very glad you guys are joining us this evening or whenever you're listening to this podcast. Tonight we have a really fun show. We're going to talk all about the rumor that Apple might actually be creating an Apple car. That plus a lot of fun Apple tips and tricks coming up. So stick around. It's going to be a really fun show. So like I said, welcome back to another week of Open Mic Night. My name is Mike Weger, and I am your host. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome to Open Mic Night. This is a show where I talk exclusively about technology, and I give you guys tips and tricks on how to make technology work for you. I fill you guys in on the latest technology news, and overall, we just have a really good time. And I also try to answer any of your guys' questions that you guys may have regarding technology. So if you guys ever do have any questions, feel free to send them on in to my email. That's mike@wegertech.com, and Weger is W-I-E-G-E-R, so wegertech.com. If you guys want to find out anything about the show, it's all over at omnpodcast.com for Open Mic Night, omnpodcast.com. There you can find all the links to subscribe to the show and pretty much get it however you want. And also, I try to put out really good show notes for you guys, so keeping you guys up to date. If you guys can't listen to the whole show, you can at least go in and check out the show notes, and all the links and everything will be there for you guys. So tonight, actually, it's kind of fun. I got a brand new audio setup going tonight, so I've got a brand new mixing board, and so I hope that the levels are all okay. So if something's not right, we might just have to play with it this week, and I'll go back and listen to everything and readjust. But I think I've got everything going all right, at least as far as I can see. It should be good. The YouTube side might be a little quiet, which is something I might need to fix in the future, but beyond that, it's kind of fun. I got a brand new board that I can do a lot more fun stuff with. So that's, that was my my geeky pleasure for this past week, was getting this new audio board and getting it all set up and ready to go for the podcast tonight. So that was a lot of fun. I do want to thank right now, I want to thank my sponsor, and that is WLMN Radio. They are fantastic. If you guys have not checked them out, I know I've talked to you guys about them in the past, but they're at WLMNradio.com. I'm actually streaming live over there. So I stream live, and then they broadcast my show as well as a lot of other really good tech shows. So if you guys like tech talk, like this show, then you should definitely head on over there and check them out. They've got a lot of great stuff. So a huge thank you to Roger and everyone over at WLMN Radio. They are fantastic, and they are just a lot of fun to work with. They're always helping me out. So a big thank you to them. All right, so why don't we just go ahead and get right on into the news tonight. And my first story actually comes from The Verge, and it's kind of just a funny story about Apple, and actually mainly about Comcast. So Comcast, as you guys know, I've dissed on them in the past. They're usually, when I talk about them, it's usually for bad things, and you can kind of judge tonight on if you think this is a bad story or not. I just thought it was kind of funny. So The Verge reported that Comcast, their new remotes that Comcast gives all their customers, on the back, if you look on the back, it is inscribed with "Designed by Comcast in Philadelphia." Now, obviously, this is a huge play off of Apple's iconic "Designed by Apple in California," or in Cupertino. I can't remember which one it says. I think it says California. But obviously, that is an iconic Apple thing. That has, Apple has been doing that for a long time on all of their products. And especially, it was kind of funny, Apple being known for design, they still put these words down at the bottom of all their devices or on the back. It's on the computers, it's on the phones, it's on absolutely everything. And so it was just kind of funny that Comcast went and, just pretty much stole it word for word, but they just obviously switched it up to them. So "Designed by Comcast in Philadelphia." But, imitation is the greatest form of flattery, I hear. That's what they say. So maybe Comcast is just admitting that Apple maybe got it right with that, and that it looks good, and it's a solid addition to their devices. So that was just kind of one of the funny stories coming out of the Apple news sphere. So, but the biggest news being talked about in the past couple weeks is actually about the possibility of an Apple car. Now, I know a lot of people like an Apple car. That just doesn't sound, doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound like something that could actually be happening. But the rumors are out there that Apple is creating a fully electronic car. Now, there's actually some good reason for these rumors. There's actually, a lot of information that might back and make it a little bit true. Now, I'm not going to say that I believe it. I'll believe it when I see it. Everyone loves to rumor about what Apple's going to create next. It's a fun story to think about. That's really why I tell you guys, is because it is kind of fun to think about Apple making a car, but obviously, it is pure speculation and pure rumor, so don't put anything behind that. But kind of, the reason why people are thinking that Apple is going to create a car is because they are in a very, very good financial spot right now to create a new car, and especially to innovate in this area. They have their market capitalization is at $700 billion. And that is just an astronomical number for our market capitalization, just huge. And, cash on hand alone, they have $180 billion in the bank in cash. So $180 billion and pretty much fun money that they can use however they want. And so a big project like an all-electric car would be a great way, especially from investors' point of view, for them to spend a lot of this money that they have sitting around. One of the biggest, all the critics out there love to bash on Apple that they have all this extra money sitting around. They're in a great financial spot, yet they're not using it. They're just letting this money kind of sit there, and they're not making the most of their money. They're either not reinvesting it back into the company, in research and development, or giving actually out more in dividends, I'm sure, which is what a lot of stockholders would want to see from Apple. Their stock price is at a record high, $127, and you got to remember that's after the split just over a year ago, and so they split their stock price, and now they're right back up to $127, so their stock is at a record high. They're just overall in a fantastic financial situation, and so we'd love to see them start investing in some big research opportunities. Now, obviously, I've talked to you guys in the past that, Google just, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I talked to you guys about how maybe Google and Uber might be competing on the, electronic car market and making self-driving cars. And so if we throw Apple into the mix, that's 3 huge companies, and I'm sure, Tesla, I'm sure is going to be in the mix there as well. But that's some really large companies that are going to be throwing a lot of money into the research and development of not only electric cars, but self-driving cars. And so I think that would just be a lot of fun to see. And how awesome would it be to be able to just, go to work in a car that drives itself and not have to worry about driving? I just think that would be absolutely fantastic. I know I would love it. And so, Apple, get on it. Spend all your money. I would love to just be able to hop in a car and tell it where to go and let it drive itself. I think that scares a lot of people. But for me, I don't know. I find it kind of exciting. And I believe that it might be safer, when we take humans out of the mix. Yes, I know computers, obviously can't be trusted, but computers do what we tell them to do. So if we have really solid programmers out there and we get a lot of testing and a lot of R&D goes into this, it could end up being a lot safer than having humans behind the wheel, especially with all of the distracted driving stuff going around nowadays. I just think that if we trust computers a little bit more, I think that would be better. And so who knows? Who knows how long it'll be until we have a self-driving car, or even if it's true. We don't even know if Apple is going to be actually researching an Apple car. And we know we probably will not hear anything about this for a long time from Apple. They're very tight-lipped about all that sort of research and development that they do. Another big story out of Apple is that they are actually investing a lot of money into renewable energy. And so out in California, they're actually doing a new plant that just provides a ton, I think of solar power is what they're focusing on, that provides a lot of energy for the state of California. Now, obviously, there are, benefits for Apple to do this, because the reports are that they are producing enough energy from this new source, from this new plant that they're going to be building. It's going to be enough energy to power their 2 new main campuses, all the Apple stores in the state of California, and 1 of their data centers. So pretty much Apple is going to be self-sufficient in the energy department in the state of California. Now, of course, this allows them to get, deals on energy and deals on power in the state. So there are incentives for them to create this new plant that's going to be producing a lot of energy. But overall, it's just another good thing to see Apple working on the green energy, and to see companies in general really worrying about the environment and investing their own cash into these renewable energy sources. It's really good to see. So the next rumor, tonight is a lot of rumor because we're spending a lot of time on Apple, is the next rumor is that the Magic Mouse, so you guys know the mouses that you guys use, I have one right here, for your Mac, or the trackpad, and also the trackpad that's built into laptops, that might be getting Touch ID in the future. Now, obviously, Touch ID is the fingerprint reader that we have on the new phones and iPads. And so, in the home button right now, there's a fingerprint reader. And so you can set it up to know all your fingers and you can unlock your device through the fingerprint reader. Now, before I had this, I didn't really know what I was missing. I recently got the iPhone 6 Plus, and so it was my first experience with the Touch ID, and I have fallen in love with it. I actually go back to my iPad that does not have the Touch ID, and I find myself still resting my thumb on the home button to try and get into it just out of habit. It's a really quick way. It's very secure. It's a lot more of a secure way than a passcode. Fingerprints, obviously, a lot more secure than a 4-digit passcode. But the thing I love about Touch ID is all the integration that the applications have used. So when I buy an app on the App Store, I no longer have to type in my iTunes password. I can just use the fingerprint sensor. Or on Amazon, when I sign into my Amazon account, Amazon uses Touch ID, and so I can just sign in that way. It saves a ton of time. It saves you from having to remember a lot of those passwords. And so I really like Touch ID, and I can only imagine if I had it on my computer in the form of on my mouse or my trackpad, how awesome it would be to be able to just say, hey, when I log into any website, just use my Touch ID as my password. It knows it's me, obviously. And if I could use my Touch ID for absolutely everything, I just think that would be fantastic. I would love to be able to use Touch ID on my computer, and I really like that idea. It is a rumor. This just comes from macrumors.com, so who knows if it's actually true or not. But I think this is one of the more believable rumors out there. Apple really likes using Touch ID. It's more secure for them, and they like it. And we obviously saw them, kind of try it out with the iPhone and then take it to all their lines. And so I think it's a high possibility that they bring Touch ID to their Macs. Now, a lot of people out there are going to say, oh, well, our Windows laptops or our Lenovo laptops have had fingerprint readers for years. This is nothing new. And yes, that is true. Macs have never had fingerprint readers on their laptops or their desktops. And on the Windows side, all the makers of Windows have had that for a long time. The one thing about that, I know that I've used some thumb readers in the past on laptops, on Windows side laptops, and they were very, very clunky and they didn't work very well. And one of the big criticisms of Apple when they were first coming out with Touch ID, before this ever came out, the critics were saying, if it's anything like the fingerprint readers we've had in the past, it's going to be pretty much useless. They're awful. You have to position your finger just right on the point of your thumb, and you have to wiggle it, and it's always not picking up my fingerprint. But Touch ID on the phones, I think, works amazing. I know some people have said that for them it doesn't, they can't get it to work that well. But for the most part, I'd say most people are extremely happy with the Touch ID. And for those people who aren't happy with Touch ID, I would strongly urge you guys to go into your Touch ID settings and keep adding your thumb in different places. So if you've added your thumbprint and you just did the minimum amount when you set up your phone, go back in and it allows you to keep touching the sensor, and it pretty much is picking up more points and more points of your thumb, and it learns your thumb better the more you do it. And so I would highly suggest, if you are having problems with Touch ID, to go into your Touch ID settings on your phone and mess around with that, because I do think it will help. But just overall, I think it's a fun rumor. I like it. And that kind of seems to be the theme tonight, are rumors that I really hope come true. I really hope we end up getting the Apple Car, and I really hope that we have Touch ID on the mice and keyboards and trackpads on all of our Apple devices, just because I am such a huge fan of Touch ID, and I've fallen in love with it. It's a lot of fun. So that is going to wrap it up for the news section of the show. And so the next section is pretty much, I have created a very long list. I have taken all of the questions that I have gotten over about the last year on Apple products, and I've created a long list that I'm going to go through on the coming episodes of Open Mic Night. So I'm going to pick a few of these, and a lot of them actually I couldn't remember, or I don't know if they want me to say their name on who they were that submitted them, but if I know that they're okay with it, I'll probably say who asked the question. But this just brings up, again, if you guys ever have any questions, especially related to Apple products, definitely email me, mike@uyghurtech.com, or you can tweet at me @uyghurtech. Just go ahead and do that, because I love helping people out, and I'll usually get back to you with a response. And then it also tells me the type of questions that you guys have about products, and I can talk about them on the show so that everyone else can kind of, if they had the same question, they can hopefully get that answered. And so the first question tonight was actually submitted onto the Facebook group. So in the past week, if you guys didn't know, I added a new Facebook group for Uyghur Tech. So I called it the Uyghur Tech Forums. And pretty much, I had a Facebook page before, but that's not very interactive for the community. And so what I wanted was a place that all of you guys can go and ask questions, and I can answer them, or you guys can answer each other's questions. Just a place you guys can bring all of your technology questions. And so a Facebook group seemed to be the best way for me to do that. And so if you guys just head over to facebook.com and you just search Uyghur Tech Forums, or if you go to omnpodcast.com, it's actually, the link is on there as well. But Ian posted a question in the Facebook group, and his question was about Time Machine, and it was asking actually a very good question that it gets asked a lot, so I wanted to bring it up with you guys. Now, Time Machine, for those of you guys who don't know, is a way for you to back up your computer and on a Mac. So if you have a Mac, you can plug in an external hard drive, and Time Machine is built into the Mac. It's a piece of software that's built in. So what you do is you go in and you select, you say, I want to use this external USB hard drive as my backup, and Time Machine then will, the first time it does it, it'll just back up your entire computer. Now, the nice thing about Time Machine is that it has a very nice interface for, let's say you delete a file, and then 10 minutes later you realize you need that file, or a week from now you realize you need that file. Now, usually you'd be out of luck unless you had other forms of backup, but with Time Machine, you can actually go into the Time Machine interface and go back to, let's say, last week, last month, last year, and it actually keeps track of pretty much a snapshot of your computer at that time. So if I know that I deleted my file 2 days ago, I just scroll back 2 days and the file will be there. So Time Machine does have its good uses, but obviously it's not the only way that you guys are going to back up your computer. But I just want to kind of cover Ian's questions first. So Ian's question was, I don't want Time Machine to back up my entire drive. Is there any way to tell it to only back up certain folders? Now, with Time Machine, the way the settings work is that you can tell Time Machine, do not back up certain folders, but you can't do the opposite. I can't go into Time Machine and say, hey, only back up these folders. Now, the thinking behind this is that most people want their entire drive backed up. And so if you are leaving it to kind of the default setting for just the everyday user who doesn't really go in and change the settings, you want it to automatically back up your entire drive. That just makes the most sense because that's what most people are going to want to do. Now, I totally understand where Ian's coming from, though, because it's kind of frustrating if you have a lot of stuff on your computer and you're only worried about certain things, then, it's hard to not be able to tell Time Machine, hey, only back up this stuff. But what you can do is under the Time Machine settings, you can go in there and say, don't back up certain items. So you could go in there and tell it to not back up a lot of your folders, and then it will only do what's left. And so that is kind of the workaround. That's how you pretty much tell Time Machine what to back up and what not to back up. Like I said, it is a little clunky, but it's kind of built, Apple does a lot of things, kind of ease of use for their everyday user. They want it to be, just the easiest. They kind of want to do the settings that most people would do. And for most people, when they're backing up their computer, they want to back up the entire computer so that everything is there if something were to happen to their hard drive. Now, being on the topic of Time Machine, it brought up a lot of other questions that I've been asked in the past about Time Machine. So I thought I'd just group them all in together and do kind of one big Time Machine segment. So the other question I got, and the most common question I got is, can I back up to a network drive? So for those of you guys who maybe have never played with network drives, a network drive is either a hard drive that plugs in via Ethernet to your network. They're called network attached storage, or a NAS. Or it's also, a USB hard drive that you might actually have plugged into your router. So your router might have the ability to plug in a USB hard drive, and then that hard drive can be accessed by anyone on the wireless network. And yes, you can select a network device to be your Time Machine backup. All you need to do is pretty much, if your computer can see the device, so in your Finder, if you can see that hard drive, then it should also show up in your Time Machine settings. So if you go into Time Machine and it's in the section where you're going to select what drive you want to use, it should appear there. And so as long as your computer can see the hard drive, then you should be good to go. Now, the one thing, my one word of warning about using a network attached storage device as your backup for Time Machine is that Time Machine, it's not a scheduled backup. You can tell it to back up now, but Time Machine backs up kind of on its own schedule whenever it senses changes on your computer with files, and you can't really set when it's going to back up. And so if you have a laptop that you are bringing on and off of your network, it might not be being backed up as often as you would like. So just know that. Know that when you're, obviously, let's say you're at home and that's where your network device is, when you take your laptop out of the house, you're no longer backing up to Time Machine. Now, it will back up when you come back home, but let's say you go on a trip or you travel a lot, your backups just might not be as regular as you would like. But if you have a desktop that's always in your house, then backing up to a network drive for Time Machine is completely fine, and it should work actually pretty well. I know that that's actually how my family used to run their Time Machine backups, and the reason we did that was because we could back up all of our computers to one drive without unplugging it and plugging it into each of our computers. So we all used to back up to a huge hard drive that we had hanging off of our network via USB, and it worked really well. We didn't really have too many problems with it, and it's overall it is a good way to use Time Machine. But again, if you're on mobile devices, just remember that it's not going to be getting backed up as regularly as you would like. And then the next question is actually a question that I had myself about Time Machine, and then, I thought that you guys might want to know it too. And my question was, hey, is there any way to limit how much space Time Machine can take up? So Time Machine, obviously, it's backing up your entire computer, so that is a lot of data. And then it adds on each day as you add more files and take files off of your computer. And because Time Machine keeps snapshots of each kind of day or week or month as it goes along, it's not just the size of your hard drive. It actually gets bigger and bigger as time goes on because it's adding on. It's not deleting the old backup and doing a new one. It's adding on to that backup. And so all of a sudden you could realize that if you have an external hard drive and you're running Time Machine, if you run it for a year or 2 years, you might fill up that entire drive. Now, that might be a problem for you, that might not. You're like, hey, that external hard drive is just for Time Machine, and that is fine. But so in the settings, there is no way to tell Time Machine, hey, stop backing up once you've hit 200 gigabytes. And that seems to be like it would be a good addition to the settings, and I could see Apple maybe doing that in the future. But as of right now, you can't tell Time Machine, hey, stop backing up when you've reached this level. So you have to do it in a roundabout way. And so the way I did it was I have a terabyte external hard drive plugged into my computer. Now, obviously, I don't want that entire terabyte being taken up by Time Machine backup. First of all, because I only need maybe like a month to 2 months worth of backup. And so I'm not really worried about having years and years of backup. But I can't tell the software to do it. So what I did and what you guys can do is you can actually partition your hard drive. So partitioning your hard drive is pretty much, it makes the drive appear like 2 different drives, or 3 or 4, however many partitions you want. And so you can take any hard drive, and on the Mac, using disk utility, you can divide up your hard drive into pretty much smaller hard drives. It's actually not dividing up the memory inside the hard drive, but it's making it appear to your computer like it's a few different drives. So what I did is I went into disk utility, and onto my external drive, I just simply told it to make 2 partitions, to split the drive into 2, 500 gigabytes and 500 gigabytes. And so this makes it appear as 2. So when you go back into your Time Machine settings, you will see those 2 different drives, even though technically it's only one USB external drive. And so the nice part about this is you can select one of your partitions, and then Time Machine thinks it only has 500 gigabytes to work with. So once it gets to that 500, it'll just start replacing itself and doing what Time Machine does, where when it gets full, it just starts deleting the oldest stuff and keep putting on new stuff. So the older stuff falls off, but the new stuff is still going on. And so it's a good way to kind of trick your Time Machine into thinking it's a lot smaller than it is. So it was nice for me because now I have a hard drive where 500 gigabytes is devoted to Time Machine, and then 500 gigs I can use for my own backup or my own file storage or whatever I want to do with that other half. But you can partition drives into however many pieces you want. Usually I stick with like 2 or 3. I think it just seems to work out better. But so remember that you can always partition your drive. And there's a lot of different uses for partitioning drives, but Time Machine is definitely one. It's actually the only reason I've ever partitioned a drive for me. For my personal use, it's the only reason I do it. And so actually when I'm looking at my computer here, I see I named them. So when you make a partition, you can name it. So it looks like I have 2 hard drives plugged into my computer. I have Time Machine backup, and then I have one that just says Uyghur. And so I know that Uyghur is my one that I can just throw files in, and Time Machine Backup obviously is the Time Machine. So remember that you guys can partition drives and make Time Machine actually use less space than you want it to. And on that point, I would do that before you ever set up Time Machine. I wouldn't try and do it after the fact. You're like, oh, well, I'll see if I need the space. Just do it from the get-go, especially if you have a big hard drive, because it's going to become a time where all of a sudden you're going to have 3/4 of it filled, and you're just like, man, I really don't need that much Time Machine data on there. And editing Time Machine data and deleting it is a lot harder than it appears. And so I would just do that from the onset. Before you even start using Time Machine, partition your external hard drive and go about it that way. So the other thing about Time Machine is that it is a fantastic backup, and it's good, and it's better than nothing. But I would say it shouldn't be your only backup, and that's for multiple reasons. But let's say that, I have my computer and my computer goes down or something like that, and I don't really want to back up from Time Machine. What I like to do is I like to pretty much do a carbon copy cloner. So there's actually software out there called Carbon Copy Cloner, and it makes a clone of your hard drive. It pretty much just says, hey, this is the hard drive, and it makes a copy of it. And that makes it a lot easier. If you have to ever rebuild a hard drive, or if you go ever into another computer technician or to a tech guy that he's going to like a image copy, what they call it, a lot better than a Time Machine backup. So Time Machine, the reason it's great is because if you delete a file from 2 weeks ago or yesterday or whatever, it's very easy to scroll back through the days and find that file. But as far as having a backup of your hard drive to rebuild from if your hard drive ever crashes, I would suggest doing it a different way, such as Carbon Copy Cloner, or there's a bunch of other, cloning pieces of software out there that you guys can use. I like Carbon Copy Cloner. I think it's the best. Or, if you really want to, you can honestly, to back up just files, you can just drag them over to a folder on an external hard drive. Now, that is probably the least useful way to back up your computer, but it's, again, better than nothing. But I would say if you use Time Machine, also use Carbon Copy Cloner. It's good to have both. And I think you guys will end up really liking it and appreciating it that one time that your hard drive does crash. The other part about backup is you always want an off-site backup. So, obviously, if my apartment catches on fire, it doesn't matter that I had a Time Machine backup because that was sitting right next to my computer, and that's now gone too. Or if you have a flood or anything like that happens, both of those are going to be gone. So they're good if your hard drive crashes, but if anything else were to happen, theft, anything like that, someone breaks into your house, anything like that, obviously backing up locally is not going to help you out. So I would use a service like Carbonite. Carbonite is pretty much an off-site backup. It always is running on your computer, so anytime you make a change, it updates it, and your backup is stored on a server somewhere else and not here, so that if you did have a fire, if you have a flood, something like that happens, you will still have your data backed up. Now, there's a lot of ways to do this now. A lot of people are actually having little tiny home servers, and them and a friend will just keep backups of their stuff at each other's house. There's a ton of ways to do it, but Carbonite, it's actually pretty affordable. I want to say it's like $60 a year, but to have that offsite backup is great. And then another thing about Carbonite is actually you have access to your entire computer wherever you're at. You can always log into Carbonite and view all the files and download any of them you need. So it's almost like a huge cloud storage as well as being backup. But so that kind of covers all the Time Machine things I want to talk about with you guys. If you guys have any Time Machine questions that I didn't cover, be sure to come on over and email me, mike@uyghurtech.com, and I can always help you guys out with any questions you guys have on Time Machine or anything that I talk about. Sorry, okay, so actually, and this is a good time to talk. If you guys are not joining us live, you guys can come on out Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Central Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific, I believe. And so come on out and join us. There's a chat room, and you guys can hop on in the chat and ask questions or anything like that. So yeah, come join us live because it's a lot of fun to have you guys out in the chat room as well. So beyond Time Machine, I have a few more things tonight that I want to cover, common questions that I get about certain things that I think will help you guys out. So the first one is about any way to monitor your Mac. So a lot of people say, man, my Mac's just running really slow right now. I don't know what kind of processes are going on in the background. I don't know if my CPU's running really hot. I don't know. I don't know what's happening with my computer. It just seems sluggish. Now, there's a lot of reasons to use this next piece of software that I'm going to tell you guys about, but The main one for me is just having a monitor of my computer that I can always see, and I can just say, hey, well, I wonder why my CPU is spiking up. But the software is called iStat Menus, iStat space menus. And I think it's like $12 for a single license, but you can try it out for free for I think about 30 days. And what it does is it puts a little menu bar up at the top. So in your menu bar, right next to your Wi-Fi and your sound and all of that stuff, it puts a bunch of different gauges up there. Now, it kind of reminded me of the olden days, on the Windows where you'd have, your CPU graph and everything on your desktop, but it looks really nice. You almost don't even notice it if you're not looking for it. And it's fully customizable. So right now up in my corner, I have my CPU graph, I have my solid state drive, I have it monitoring my read and write speeds to my hard drive, and also my RAM and how much RAM is being utilized right now. Now you might think, man, I would never use that, Mike. I'm not really a nerd. I don't really care when my CPU is spiking or anything like that. I don't care. But you would be surprised when you'd want to use it. It's kind of nice for when, like I said, when your computer is running a little bit slow and you're just wondering, is it my computer or what? Usually I can just take a quick look up at my CPU and I say, oh, it's kind of spiking. Let me click on it. And when you click on stuff in iStat menus, it gives you a ton of detail on what's going on in your computer. So right now when I click on it, I see obviously that my Wirecast application is using a majority of my CPU. And I'm like, oh, obviously that's why it's going up, because I'm using Wirecast right now, and that takes a lot of my CPU. And it'll tell you whatever. So if you think, oh man, it's running really slow, oh, well, Google Chrome seems to be taking up a lot of my CPU right now. There's just a lot of times where it might come in handy to know what's running on your computer, or if your RAM's running really high, like, okay, it might be a good time to reboot. That's kind of why my computer's running a little slow. I can't describe how useful iStat menus is to you, because it's extremely useful. And it's so customizable. There's so many different options with it. It gives you the temperature of your computer on the inside, so you know if it's running hot or cold. And it also, one of my favorite parts, is it actually tells you how much data is being pushed out or taken in from your network. And so you can see your upload and download. So this is another good reason. You can kind of check your speeds when you're downloading stuff, when you're watching Netflix. You can really see actually how much data is being pushed out and brought in from your computer. So if you're supposed to be, if my internet provider says I'm supposed to be at this speed, but really I'm not even getting close to those speeds. It's another one of those monitoring things on your computer that just kind of helps you out. And you'll actually get to know your computer really well. You'll get to know that, oh, when it runs these certain processes, it's really taxing on my CPU. It might not run the best when I'm doing these sort of activities. And so I always suggest to people iStat menus. And I always suggest it because, trust me, the tech guy in your life, whoever you have that helps you out with your technology, if anyone is, your go-to guy and you go to them with problems, they will love that you have iStat menus, because they'll probably ask you, okay, how's your memory doing? Are you getting pretty close on that? How's your CPU running? What's your temperature? Is it getting really hot? Stuff like that is really good information for your tech guy to have. And so even if you don't like it for yourself, but you are constantly going to someone who's asking you those questions, iStat menus is definitely one of the best additions I've added to my computer. All right, moving right along to another question that I received last year from a viewer of Open Mic Night is all about USB hubs. So for most of us that are especially on laptops, we're limited to 2 USB hubs. Now for my iMac, I actually have 4, which is really nice because it's usually as many as I need. But some of us might need more USB hubs than our computer has. And so getting a USB hub, which is pretty much it plugs into one of the USB ports on your computer, and then it offers up to 5, 8, 10 open USB ports. Now these things can be fantastic, or they can be detrimental. They can cause a lot more problems than they help if you don't have the right USB hub for you. So some things to think about when you're buying a USB hub. Now USB hubs are fantastic and they work well. But the biggest difference between USB hubs, and you'll notice it in the price, is whether the hub is powered or not. And when I say not powered, that means that all the power to that USB hub is coming from the USB that's plugged into your computer. So these hubs plug into your computer, and if they're not powered, they're pulling all their power from that USB on your computer. Now that's fine and okay if you're using, if you're plugging in keyboards or mouses to this hub, things that don't draw a lot of power. But when you start plugging in things like external hard drives or cameras or anything that start to take a lot of power, you're going to start running into some very weird problems. It'll maybe go on and off and it can't stay powered, or all your devices will start to be affected on the hub. They'll all start not receiving the power they need. And so I would highly suggest, if you guys are going to spend the money and if you do need a USB hub, even if right now you don't think you need a powered hub, I would get a powered hub. Usually they're not too much more expensive. Definitely nothing more than double the price. It usually adds maybe $10 to $15 onto the hub price. But when I say it's powered, that means that the actual hub plugs into USB to your computer, but it also has a cord that plugs into an outlet. So you have actual power to that hub. Now that can really help you out when you have maybe 2 hard drives plugged into this hub. If you have cameras, anything like that, it'll help so that the computer USB bus isn't powering everything that's on this hub. And so the reason someone asked me about this was they had that same exact problem. They had a non-powered hub, and they had 2 external hard drives plugged into that hub, and both of them kept turning on and off. And he said, I actually went back and returned the hub, got a new one, still did the same thing. And so I kind of had to walk them through that you actually will need a powered USB hub to do that. And another reason you would need a powered USB hub is a lot of people like to charge all of their devices. And so especially if you're a traveler, what a lot of people do is they get one of these USB hubs, plug it into their computer, and then they charge, their phone, their tablet, anything that plugs into USB, pretty much they charge it all. Well, those things are going to charge extremely slow if it's not a powered USB hub, because you got to think you're taking a power from one USB and you're splitting it into charging like 4 or 5 different devices. But if you get a powered USB hub, something that gives it power beyond the computer, then they'll charge at their normal rate. And so just something to think about if you are using USB hubs and you're experiencing problems, or if you're thinking about getting a USB hub, I would definitely go with a powered USB hub. Anker makes some great USB hubs, the brand, and I'll post maybe a link or two in the show notes after the show with the hubs that I would think would work out best for you guys. So the final piece of advice I have for you guys is about login items on the Mac. So if you guys have been installing software on your Mac over a period of time, you've probably noticed that the next time you reboot your computer, it might automatically launch that application. And that's because a lot of times when you install applications, you end up giving it permission to start that piece of software when your computer starts. And it can be useful, or it also can be annoying. The biggest culprit of this, I hear a lot of people saying, hey, Spotify starts up every time I start up my computer, or Skype starts up every time I turn on my computer, and I don't want those to start up. I don't use Spotify all that often. I don't want Skype to start up. There's actually a setting in your general system preferences where you can go and edit your login items, is what they're called. And it's actually in a spot that you wouldn't think of. So if you have applications that are launching and you don't want them to, or in the reverse scenario, if there's an application that you use all the time and you're like, man, it'd be really nice if whenever I turn on my computer, that just automatically launched. They're called login items. So if you open up your system preferences and you go to users and groups, which is kind of an odd place for this to be stored. But if you're on Yosemite, it's like the 4th row down. And so it's users and groups. And then you pick your user on your left. So I would pick me. And up on top, there's 2 little toggles. One is password and one is login items. So if you go to login items, those are all the items that are going to start up when your computer starts up. And so it's kind of confusing too, because there's check marks on them that say hide, that's a hide check mark. A lot of times when people first go into their login items, they think, oh, I have it unchecked. That means it's not supposed to start up. That's not true. If you actually want something that's on the list to not start up, you need to click it and then click the minus button down below. Or the opposite, if you want to add an application to launch, you hit the plus button and you pick the application, and then that will launch. So login items, which is under users and groups, is where those settings are stored, where it tells your computer what applications to start up when your computer turns on. So something good to know, because I know a lot of people out there were getting frustrated, especially with Spotify, that it sets that by default when you first install Spotify, that it wants to launch right away. But just a good place to go to look for that. So that is going to do it for my tips and tricks for tonight. And actually, that's going to do it for the entire show. I want to thank all of you guys for listening. And again, I want to thank Roger over at WLMN Radio. He is fantastic, and they are a huge supporter of the show, and I love streaming live over there. So hello to all you guys over there, to Hector and Roger and all of them. You guys are fantastic. Like I said, if you guys did not join us live, come on out live. 7 p.m. Central Time on omnpodcast.com/live, and you guys can head there and join in the chat room and ask me questions or talk with everyone else that's watching live. It's a lot of fun. We love to do that. Send in your questions, please. I would love to do that on these tips and tricks. I like to know what you guys have questions about. Obviously, I have things that I think are useful, but I would love to, if you guys have questions, to share your question with everyone else so that everyone can kind of learn at the same time. Another thing is definitely go over and join the Facebook group, which is Uyghur Tech Forum. So if you head on over to UyghurTech.com/Facebook, that'll take you right there. Join the group, start posting all your questions there. And there's no such thing as a dumb question. Anyone that's in there, I think we're all part of a community where we wouldn't make fun of you for asking a question. So feel free to keep asking questions. Big thank you to, Michael Ray and Ian for hopping right in, this week. I just created the group and they're already posting questions and comments and stuff like that in there. So thank you to you guys. Everything else about me is UyghurTech.com or OMNpodcast.com. I am looking to kind of really focus on Apple these next few weeks and see how that goes. And so especially if you guys have Apple questions, be sure to send those in. Thank you guys for joining, and I will see you guys soon. But until I do, tech on.